The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And good evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you are. And welcome to The Divine Truth on Revolution Radio. And this lovely evening, we have my co-host, Sarah Adams, with us. Are you there, Sarah? Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. And our guest this evening is a multidimensional physician. Her name is Dr. Maree Batchelor. Hi, Maree. How are you?
Hi, Taj. How are you? Thank you for having me on. And hi, Sarah.
Hi. It's lovely to have you on.
Now, I know it's early for you. You're in Australia. I hope you've had your coffee and you're awake. So,
I guess, yeah, I've managed all of that coffee and I'm ready to talk.
Okay. And many of our listeners may have already heard of you. I mean, I watched your show earlier this week with Mary Rodwell on Alfred Lambert Webber's channel, which was an interesting show. We've had Mary on our show a couple of months ago, and that was one of my favourite shows where she talked quite a lot with Sarah about a lot of things. And I wanted to talk initially first, how did you become a multidimensional physician? Because you was a medical doctor before. What made you stop? I mean, I'm assuming you've stopped becoming a medical doctor and you're now working on as a multidimensional physician. How did that happen?
Right. Well, yes, I certainly have stopped working in mainstream medicine. And look, my journey from mainstream medicine into what I term now as a multidimensional physician, working with energies to release people from their programs and technologies that are stopping them from living their real truth, living a life with peace, love, joy, well-being and self-healing. And my journey began back in 2008. I had been living a life that I would describe as a sort of picture-perfect 3D existence, working as a family doctor here in Melbourne, Australia, and I was married to a surgeon. We had 4 children at the time. They were aged 2, 4, 6 and 8. I was living in a mansion with a swimming pool and a tennis court. I had a cleaning lady and, we had nice holidays. And really from a 3D perspective, I had a pretty amazing existence. And this all changed very suddenly in June 2008 when out of the blue, my 4-year-old son, William, was suddenly involved in an accident, and he eventually died 11 days after being hit by a car in sort of inexplicable, ridiculous circumstances. And it was at that time that I started to get downloaded from what I would say the multidimensional realms to what our existence really is. And the journey began from that moment and continues today and has really changed me completely, who I am.
So would you say you had like a spiritual awakening of sorts when that happened to you?
Look, absolutely. When he was hit, we were basically on a family walk on a winter's day on a little local beach, walked up to the top of a path, and a car that was driven by an underage driver, completely out of control, just catapulted towards him and pinned him to a fence in front of the whole family. And at that moment, even though, of course, I was hysterical, traumatized, in complete and utter shock, something else was happening to me at that very time that was just sort of hinting that there was more going on and that somehow this was part of a bigger plan. And of course, you know, I had no spiritual background, no religious background, and was very 3D. So it was quite confusing for me to sort of get this, you know, understanding that perhaps there was some bigger plan, bigger force going on. And really that just catapulted me into, yes, the awakening and understanding who we really are. And yeah, it was a terrible, terrible time. But these messages that I kept being given were helping me and supporting me in my grief. And I really did grieve in a very different way to what I would have had I not experienced these understandings, downloads, and hints from the multidimensional realm.
Right. Do you know where these messages and where these downloads were coming from? Do you have any idea now? Or
well, look, at the time I didn't, but I guess to me they were just coming from outside what I would call our matrix or the construct that we live in, because I was getting understandings beyond anything that had been taught to me, shown to me, or anything that's really been revealed to mainstream. And, you know, the things that were happening were just, you know, lights coming to me. At the time, he was airlifted to the Children's Hospital and was on the operating table, and my husband rang me to say, look, he's made it to theatre. He should be, you know, that's a great sign. You know, he could recover from this. And I got a ball of light sent to me at that time, and I was an hour away from the hospital, and a ball of light came to me at that time and gave me this amazing sense of peace. And I then discovered later that he'd actually died on the operating table and was having open chest cardiac massage at the time. And that ball of light seemed to be when he had died on the table. They did revive him, and he went on to live another 11 days in a coma on life support. But that was such an interesting experience that, you know, came from what I would say was his soul aspect coming to give me a sign. And I continued to get signs like that over the months and years to follow.
Right. So like prior to 2008, you had no like experiences of like paranormal
none
or
at all.
UFOs, aliens, any kind of weird experiences prior to 2008?
No, nothing at all. And I, you know, often now reflect back to who I was before. And I know that if I met myself now, I would struggle to understand, you know, some of the concepts and things that I talk about, because when you come from that very closed, unawakened mind, this information is really, it's not accessible because we are just shut down and don't have access to it. And so, yeah, I really had no experiences, none at all. I wouldn't have believed in extraterrestrials. I wouldn't have believed in even life after death, you know, as, you know, reincarnation. All that I know now about who we are was, was not known to me before 2008.
Right.
So it's quite an abrupt learning curve, really. Yeah.
And
Right.
I know that this is a bit harsh to say in a way, but the death of your son, it prompted you to awaken in a way. There's some huge positive, it sort of how do you say that word? It sort of pushed you towards something absolutely positive,
Yeah.
and that's awakening.
Look, absolutely. And that was part of what I was experiencing, was just this understanding that somehow on a higher level, this was okay. And that somehow it was a contract that I'd had with him, that this was going to be the point in my life where everything changed completely. And look, you know, it doesn't take away from the human loss and the human grief. However, when you flip your perspective to the higher understanding of an infinite, that we are infinite beings, that we reincarnate, that this mind-body costume that we animate for this particular lifetime is just such a small part of who we are. And we can start to really put it into a higher perspective, which then helps ease the grief and we help to understand what's going on. But I certainly did get that feeling very early on that something extraordinary was unfolding for me. And I kept getting guided that way. And, you know, synchronicities were unfolding and experiences that I just couldn't deny. And what was interesting at that time is that I went to see, you know, a mainstream medical doctor. I also was advised to go and have counselling for grief. And I did not find any relief from exploring those avenues. In fact, if anything, I was the one passing the box of tissues to the psychologist as I would tell my story, because what we find in a sort of mainstream understanding without any awakened perspective, there really is no solution for our grief. It is just this hideous loss, you know, and when we're coming from, well, that's it, life's over, there's nothing more, it's really really difficult to deal with. And so I pulled away from any of those mainstream methods, particularly when all they could do was offer sleeping tablets and antidepressants. And I just realized that was just not the path for me. And, you know, I started to get significant downloads. I'm a runner, and I was running regularly, and I used to run a lot to just try and, you know, help with the grief. And at one point I remember running down the road and just saying, God, you need to help me, which was an interesting thing for me to call out to God, being non-religious and non-spiritual. But I got messages and I heard a voice that said, you must be quiet, you must be still. And I realized that meant it was time to start meditating, and it was time to send all the people in the area, the relatives and the friends that I was inundated by. It was time to send them away, shut the gates, and really start going within and finding out the truth of who I was and what this world was all about, and then the universe, the multiverse, and get a greater understanding. And even to the point where, you know, messages of you must be still were starting to make sense. And I had one last sort of trip down to the local shopping centre, and it was actually to pick up some film that I had developed of William's last few weeks. And I walked past a bookshop and saw the copy of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and started reading that cover to cover, and the whole thing made perfect sense to me. I understood it. I found it absolutely soothing, and it really was something that was such an amazing tool to help me in my process of grief.
So, like, how long after that, 2008, did you come to a realization that working as a medical doctor, you could not really help people, and you needed to change your perspective on healing?
Yeah.
I guess. I mean,
Well,
how long
look,
after that?
Well, really, I think what I was going through was so much of my own process at that time that I actually stopped working for a number of years and actually didn't do any work. And at the time, I was very fortunate because my husband was able to continue working. He took some time off, but he managed to, continue to work. So there was certainly no financial push for me to get back to work. And I really needed that time to go through my own process. But it was, sort of day by day as things unfolded and I started to recognize what was going on this planet, that I started to realize I couldn't go back to normal general practice. What happened was that I ended up going back to a form of work probably 3 to 4 years after his death. And I called myself at the time a doctor for counselling, spirituality and meditation. And I was starting to work with people to help them through their own grief process or any of their own difficult experiences, because I had a completely new perspective. And that work was very, very rewarding and, excuse me, and I had a lot of success with that. and I was actually working in an alternative centre with a chiropractor and Reiki therapists, and continuing my own process. But it was really after my visit to India in 2014 where I really catapulted into the multidimensional realms and started to change my whole practice to energy work and really bringing in these higher frequencies to help people wake up and transition through their difficulties. So it was, it was a journey from 2008 onwards, but significantly altered in 2014.
Okay, I know that like Sarah works as a multidimensional life coach, where she helps people on a multidimensional level. Can you explain how do you treat people on a multidimensional level? Do they have to be with you in person? Can it be done remotely? How does that work?
So I work both with people in person, which is great because I can do some hands-on work, and it's always lovely to have the person with me. But what's been amazing is the ability to do this via Skype. And so I'm managing to bring energies in, which of course makes sense because we don't have, when you realize that, time and space is all just a construct of this dimension. And when you're bringing in these higher frequencies and energies, we can do that with people wherever they are. And this is why people can have remote healing. And this is why, the work is so effective, even on Skype. So, so I work with people all over the world now. And that's been great. And it's interesting because after my experience in the temple in 2014 in India, where I really went through a complete rewiring after being literally zapped on the head by energies in that temple, I ended up, really rewiring and bringing in the frequencies that shifted my whole being. And it was with those, it's with those energies now that really healed me and transitioned me and transformed me that come through when I'm doing my work.
I want to hop in here and just explain a little bit about what happened when Max died, because I was absolutely devastated when he died. I screamed when he died. When I found out he died, I just screamed and collapsed.
Yeah.
And not even a day later, I know he kept coming to me. He started to come to me. And at first he didn't realize he was dead. It was really quite interesting. He didn't realize he was dead. And then he realized that, he couldn't reach me in the 3D world. He could in the spiritual world. What he did that same week, he came to me and he said to me, he goes, they allowed me to come and see you because he loves me deeply and he knew that I loved him deeply. That connection allowed him to see me. Now, he told me this, and I was transported to this sort of place that was almost like a aurora borealis. I could see almost where he had been. And he said that, when he left Earth, this realm, that he was then sort of in this place, almost like purgatory, but it wasn't, I can't say it's purgatory, but it's this place where there was all these aurora borealis colors, and there was a lot of angelic beings, and they were working on healing the things that had happened to him on Earth and that had traumatized him here on Earth. So it was a sort of a beautiful sort of hospital place, a resting place. And while in there, he said that he's not supposed to be able to contact anybody here on Earth. It's not allowed whatsoever. But since he was deeply connected to me, and he, when they were doing the healing, he wouldn't let go of me. So he decided, to ask, and they did let him come and speak to me. But he showed me this beautiful place where he was, healing. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful because he was sort of in an energetic cocoon. And in this energetic cocoon, he was, he was getting all of the healing energies he needed. After that, during the weeks, even until now, he comes to me in dreams. He tells me, or I'll see him. I very much am connected to ghosts. I have always in my life spoke to the past very, very much. And he comes to me now and he'll tell me, if I have a hard day, he'll literally come to me and tell me, that he loves me, or do this or do that, or, go eat some food. And he sends people to me. I have friends, my friend Christine, he was in her dream and he told her to get me gifts because he said it'll cheer me up. So she sent me a gift. And
wow.
then, yes. So he's very active, he's very active. He tells me massive amounts of stuff. And last time he didn't even, he didn't mind. Like his connection to me is interesting. So he tells me, he goes, we can just be like this while you live your life on Earth. Every time you go to sleep, I can just see you. You can see me, and it'll work out like this. And I told Max, I said, Max, I'm trying to live a 3D life too. You're dead there. And he didn't even care that I said he was dead. It was quite hilarious.
Wow.
He was very much convinced that I should just maybe stay a bit alone. And yes, so the souls don't die, and he quite interacts with me. When I was in New York, we had a lot of issues with people who were, let's just say, into darker energy or darker magic. And when I was in New York, he was warning me that there were some people there. So he also warns me, keeps me safe. And it's as if a lot of days, the way he interacts with me, it's as if he would still be alive right there.
Yeah. Look, I understand that. And I think that this is what people also need to understand, that when their, friends and loved ones do die from this earthly realm, it doesn't mean the end, and that we are connected to them. And, it sounds like Max is able to communicate so beautifully with you and give you that deeper understanding. And we then get this feeling that they're able to do their work from these higher dimensional realms, that they are still part of life down here and guiding us and helping us. And that even though they're not in physical, they're certainly playing their part.
I believe this to be so because he was close. For me, at least, I do a lot of astral projection and things sort of in the realms. And he was recently helping me close some gates to the lower realms. And it's quite interesting because you're right. At least in my case with him, I know that he's working and it's affecting this level of reality, even though he's not in this reality. Even though he's in other ones, it's still affecting this level of reality.
Absolutely.
I
think, sorry to interrupt, but I think that this is also what we need to understand, that it is actually the best way to alter the things that need shifting and changing in this reality is coming from these higher dimensions. And this is why, even getting back to my work, the multidimensional work is so effective, because you're coming in from a higher frequency and higher level of energy to make changes in this density. And that's clearly what Max and my William are able to assist with. And you just realize these are the realms we need to be in touch with. These are the frequencies that we need to be using to alter things in the density down here. And it's it's amazing, because it opens your eyes to how significant this multidimensional realm is to help down here.
Maree,
I agree with you. I went to the local cemetery here, and me and Max often went to cemeteries. We loved visiting old cemeteries in England, and I did when I was in France. I quite love old cemeteries, and he did too. So it was quite interesting because I was drawn to the cemetery. And of course, how you said you were running and you just broke down in grief. I've had the same thing happen to me. I would jog a lot to try to get, in a way to try to clear out a lot of emotional stuff with what happened. Well, I was jogging by the local cemetery, and I sort of decided the next day to literally go into the cemetery. And I sat in the cemetery and did a meditation. And when I was meditating, I felt this overwhelming emotion of hurt, of sadness, also of joy, of worry, and of care. It was almost all these emotions, but it was intense together. And I cried and cried. I sat there in the middle of the cemetery and cried and cried. And, I cried probably for around 2 hours. It was that intense. And this is a very large cemetery. Then I started to hear the souls and see the souls and speak to the souls. And they expressed their worry. They expressed their worry for their relatives here on earth, for, politicians that were running countries that didn't care about the people. They expressed the worry. They were really worried about their kin here on earth. And, I told them, I said, I'm sorry that some of you had hard lives. I'm sorry some of you had unfair lives. And I truly opened my heart chakra. And this is a cemetery where there were thousands of people buried. And I felt like they were using me to get out all this blocked energy. And as I did, I felt the souls were freed. And it's very interesting because in Celtic times, or even in a lot of, ancient cultures, people would do sort of ceremonies to help the past, pass on into the afterlife. And we don't do that anymore. Specifically here in the United States, this doesn't happen. Even lighting a candle, that's given the light or the energy to guide them to, the higher realms. So when I did this, I felt them be released. I came back the next day and there were thousands of fireflies. And it was, it was nearly night, and there were thousands of fireflies that were flying around, that were lighting up the whole cemetery. And it was symbolic of the souls being freed. These little, yes. Wow. So it was an utterly spiritual experience. And I think that oftentimes in a way, we forget the dead. I think one of the most intense stories is a woman, Max had just passed, and I went to my family's, I went to my brother's, and I thought, this is going to help me to get over this. It's going to help me not to ponder on it so much if I'm around my brother, his beautiful children. I was there and I decided, I'm going to go out, have some tea with my friends, friends from a long time ago, because I had been traveling. So I decided that it would just be amazing to do that. And I'm sitting out, and I went to use the ladies' room, and this woman, she comes out of the ladies' room, and I could see her mother's ghost next to her. And I could see her mom's ghost next to her, and her mom's ghost chatting away with me, telling me to speak to her. And I'm trying, to sort of live a somewhat normal life at the same time. You can't just walk up to a person and say, hey, your mother's ghost is speaking to me. Wow. It's how, how I approach these things. I've got to be careful. But her mother's ghost kept chatting away with me and telling me she was ill, that her daughter was ill, and she was very worried about her. So I decided to walk up to the girl. I said to her that I just felt she wasn't okay. And I tried to put it in a logical way so she wouldn't get alarmed and that she wasn't okay. And she said to me, she's just started to cry, and she said, I have cancer and I'm dying of cancer. And I understood then why her mother's ghost was speaking to me. So then I told her, I said, she said she had lost her mother, and it was very traumatizing to her, and she just wanted to die to go see her mother. And I was able to speak to her and speak to her mother's ghost and stream to the daughter the information, and also the inspiration to try to survive and live a beautiful life because her mother wanted her to do that. And I was able to tell her that her mother, her mother liked apple pie, that her mother liked, having an apron. Her mother was very old-fashioned. So I was able to tell her the things that nobody knew about her mother. So she knew that I was speaking to her mother's past soul. And it really helped this girl. When I was finished speaking to this girl, she lit up. She said, she's going to do her best to try to recover from cancer. She had given up on it. So I do feel that this sort of work really saves people. It helps them. It inspires them. It gives them, it gives them hope that they will see their loved ones and that their loved ones are always there watching over them. And that even though there's death in life, our souls are eternal. They are eternal. And those that we love that have passed will always be there guarding us like guardian angels.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Maree, I wanted to ask you, can anyone do this? Can anyone become like Sarah does, a multidimensional coach, like yourself? Can anyone learn this to become like a healer on a multidimensional level?
Look, I think that we all have different roles here that we need to play in our lifetimes here on the earth, and I think it depends on really what your mission is all about, and also how receptive you are and how ripe you are to awakening. And I think we're going to see more and more people waking up. I think that we are going through a great transition in humanity and evolution and a development and people getting in contact with their multidimensional selves and the realms that will help them become healers. But of course, not everybody is meant to be a healer on this planet. And we're all going to sort of have to step into what roles we have as planet Earth shifts. I think we are all capable of doing this work, but I guess it's just whether it's what a person's meant to do. And certainly for me to take on this work, I've had to transition significantly and I've had to really become a completely different person. We have to let go of our own triggers, our own ego selves to a large extent. We have to let go of the programming and the technology that has prevented us from getting into these multidimensional realms. And that's where I'm assisting people. I'm assisting people to clear off that's stopping them from finding out who they really are. And I also activate in a person their divine DNA blueprint for who they're supposed to be as a multidimensional being on the planet. And that helps guide them to what they're supposed to be doing at these times.
Right, okay. You talked a little bit with Mary Rodwell about the fact that we're being suppressed, like here in 3D reality. So a lot of us will never reach our potential because we're almost born with this sort of suppression, imprinted on us. Do you know like why we are being suppressed and who is doing it and how is there a way we can help ourselves?
Yeah, sure. So look, what I understand is that we are living in a suppressed and controlled matrix or construct that I think involves the astral realms and involves some of the more non-benevolent off-world beings. And what I see is that we have been given a form of what I call now there's been technologies used on us to keep us living in this reality without connection to the truth of who we are. And I think that has been done to us on purpose. I think that it was basically to get us to be little worker bees down here without an awareness of what's really going on in the multiverse. And I think it's also about us working for a system. We become very nice little order followers. We're all being fed information, through the education system, through entertainment and through, media of who and how we are supposed to behave. And people are not getting access to this higher truth. Now, the technologies that I refer to are, things like being fed back into the reincarnation wheels with karma. So basically, I believe that we've been given vows and contracts and spells and curses from past life incarnations, and we've been told go back with these imprints. We've somehow agreed without full knowledge to come back onto planet Earth after we've passed, be reincarnated, but actually already come in with energetic imprints of trauma, not feeling good enough. And we also, and this concept of, oh, well, we're all here for lessons and life's a school. I'm not buying that anymore. I think, sure, there is a potential for growth here in this realm, but I think that the balance has been tipped where these forces, these non-benevolent forces, have actually made it extremely difficult for us to grow and evolve. When they've used mind wiping, we come in with amnesia. We don't have access to who we've been in the past and our multidimensional aspects. And we've also been traumatized. So when we say this is a school, I'm thinking, well, what school wipes your mind, traumatizes you and feeds you back into a system without any knowledge of what you've done the previous year? It doesn't make sense to me. So I see that that's one of the technologies. I think we come in with family lineage programming. I think we take on our ancestors' trauma and karma, and that gets imprinted. I think we've had genetic manipulation right down at a DNA level. I believe that we've had things that would have been useful for us here removed, and I think we've had other genetic material added to us to make us more controllable and good little order followers. I also believe that there's, within this matrix construct, there's information, as I was saying before, that's keeping us in line. I think that they're using things like chemtrails, vaccines, over-medicating as a way of keeping us looping and suppressed without our DNA becoming activated and awakening. So, there's numerous technologies. I'm even seeing archonic plasma devices being used. I think we have non-benevolent entities that get attached to people, and they come in on our fear, they feed off our fear, and actually start to become, to puppeteer us and actually control us in a way that's not for our highest good. So I've come to the conclusion through the work and through the downloads that I've been given, and then with some further research to actually go to understand what I've been downloaded. And I'm getting a lot of, information that's backing up what I've been told.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to a talk yesterday where a lady talked about reincarnation, and her perspective on reincarnation is that when people die, their energy is, in a way, it's recycled, but the energy has an imprint of all the trauma and everything that you've experienced during this lifetime, and that all that trauma is supposed to be removed. And then when you're reincarnated, 100 or 200 years later, you don't bring back that trauma, but it doesn't always happen like that. Like you're saying, There are external influences that prevent a lot of that from happening. So you come back with these imprints of trauma and stuff, especially after things like the First and Second World War. A lot of souls that are coming back have the imprint of the trauma of war, imprinted on them, and that's that creates a lot of problems for people who are being reincarnated, who have come back as from the millions of people who died during these wars. These souls are now coming back, and they still have the imprints of the trauma of dying in a war.
Absolutely. And I say to people that when when we die, we need to go to the highest light. We need to say we want to go to source. We want to be healed of all our traumas. We want to be given a free will. We don't want to be involved in contracts and programming of suppression. And it gives us a choice then of where we want to go. Do we want to reincarnate on planet Earth? Do we want to go elsewhere? And if we want to come here, that we're not actually in a position of being controlled and suppressed. And this is our sovereign right as, infinite soul beings, that it actually is our right to come back to this planet without this, without this manipulation. And it's interesting because the new kids that Maree Rodwell talks about, they're coming onto the planet with memory. They know they're not from here. They know that they're related to other galactic systems, that they have a galactic family, that they're here to do great work to help humanity transition and actually wake up. So they have, the fact that they're coming in without the amnesia and without the level of trauma just shows that this is possible, that we go beyond these controllers and actually go to the highest light and not get fooled at lower levels into making sort of contracts and being fed back in.
Yeah. So these are like the star children that Maree Rodwell talks about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that...
Why are they different then? Have they volunteered to come here and help us? Or is it something, again, like you say, like a contract that they've agreed to come here to help humanity in a way? And that's why they can remember everything from before to help them, to deal with everything that's, happening here in 3D reality.
Yeah, look, I think that they've been, it's time on the planet to have this shift, because I think if we don't have this shift in consciousness and this awareness of who we really are, the planet is in dire straits. If we look at the planet and where we're at the moment with all the wars, poverty, disease, destruction, the lifestyles for the majority of people are not life sustaining, or for a lot of people. And I think so many of us are coming in with a sense of if it's not living in such dire straits, it's even in the Western world of people that are sort of living relatively comfortable lives. They're continuously running programs of not feeling good enough or constantly feeling like they're failing in some way, and they lack self-worth, there's judgment, and that's making them more controllable. And these children are not coming in with those programs, and they're coming in with a mission to help humanity evolve, to actually allow us to, survive and for us to ascend into a different frequency. And so I believe that they haven't been part of this soul trap and this controlling, and they're coming in with more activated DNA, with more ability to connect to their multidimensional selves. And this is what's happening to adults, and I believe this is what's happened to me, that part of my process with the death of William and then in the temple with the activation, where I went into, where I went into what I would say cosmic consciousness for many months, where I was being activated and rewired and actually undoing, as I said before, the programming that's kept me sort of controllable and suppressed in this dimension. And I think the children are coming in with that already happening, and us adults that are waking up are having our DNA activated so that we can fulfill these roles to help, the planet transition and evolve.
Yeah, I think a lot of the children, like I think Maree Rodwell was saying, they're being misdiagnosed with things like ADHD and attention deficit disorder and all these things which, I think we talked about this with Mary on my show with Sarah, that these star children, as they come into 3D reality, they're not used to living as in a 3D life, basically. That's why they find it very difficult to integrate into society. So they get diagnosed with all these ailments. They've got ADT, they're mentally ill, or they're schizophrenic, or they get labeled with all of these problems. That's why I think a lot of the star children have issues with integrating into this reality, because it is a very difficult place to be for someone who is awake and aware, and they know all their lifetimes, they know how it's supposed to be here. It's supposed to be all wonderful, and we're all supposed to get on together, and we're all supposed to work together. But that's not the reality that they've incarnated into. So it must be very frustrating for these star children.
Absolutely, and I think that there's no coincidence or accident that we're actually over medicating these children, and we are over vaccinating children at a time when the DNA is more awake and more activated, and it's a good way of manipulating them and shutting them back down. And I think that this is where us as awakened adults come in to actually help support these children so that they can get on with what their job is and their mission here on the planet. So we keep these frequencies running to help them, to really protect them, so that they, you know, that they've got people that do understand them and can support them. And I think it's not only the children that are needing this support. Anybody who is waking up is going to need some form of support, because we are breaking out of what we've really understood reality to be, and that is quite shocking to the human. And we need to really be supporting one another through this process, and understanding that it is happening more and more to people, and steering people away from mainstream medicine when they come with their experiences. I mean, I have a number of patients that come to see me who have had incredible experiences that were taken off to see psychiatrists and actually put in psychiatric institutions for many months and given antipsychotics for their experiences of coming in contact with off-world beings and being downloaded with information. And they've expressed that to friends and family and found themselves literally locked up and medicated. And, you know, we need to really start supporting people waking up humanity to really understand the multidimensional reality that we live in, and that this isn't a mental illness.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned the Matrix earlier. I wanted to talk a little bit about what is your sort of idea of this. You know, there's this idea that there's a holographic universe, and that you know, what we're living in isn't really real. Although I don't really know how you would define the word real even these days.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, for you, I guess everything is multidimensional. It's layered in a way. And that's the same with the holographic universe. It's layered, you know, on different levels. And how does that work as far as like when you like heal someone? You know, if they have a physical ailment here in 3D, how do you do you access the higher realms of dimensions and heal them on those levels, or do you heal their physical being? I mean, how does that work?
Okay. Well, look, the my understanding of this holographic universe that we live in and the multidimensional realms has come really through my own experiences. When I started to bring in frequencies, when I was embodying these frequencies, my patients would say that I had changed in how I appeared. They were describing what's called shape-shifting. And so I would take on the form of different beings or different people. I'd take on the image of an older Indian man or an Indian woman, and these were actually realized beings. I had photos to show people, and they were able to identify who I had shape-shifted into. And I seemed to embody some essences of these realized beings who had been healers in previous times. And I've taken on, you know, I've shape-shifted into, you know, an alien being. And what's been fascinating is that this is happening more and more, and not even to people that are that awake. So I was sitting at the dinner table the other day with my 15-year-old's girlfriend who'd called in to visit, and everybody else had left the table. And I could tell frequencies were coming through. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh my goodness, what's happened to you? You look completely different. You've taken on a completely different look. You look much older. You've got dark hair." Now, she's not even aware of this work. So we can access this multidimensional reality more and more. We are being opened up to it. So that was quite fascinating. So certainly my own experiences have revealed to me this multidimensional reality. I also have experiences when these frequencies come in, the whole atmosphere of the room changes, the feeling of the walls sort of being removed, and actually different, you know, different realities overlaying the reality that we're in. And I have a deep feeling and visceral sense of that. And certainly many of my patients that can see start explaining what they see. They see the beings around us. They see procedures being done. They see us put in healing chambers. They see different techniques being done to us in these different realms. So I've just had so much information that's been downloaded to me, and so many experiences and so many things happen to people that are accessing this multidimensional reality. I had one patient who came to see me, and she was feeling quite down. She was very awake and aware. I'd actually cracked her open into a multidimensional understanding over a year ago. And when she came to see me the other day, she was feeling quite flat and depressed about some of the things that had happened in 3D reality. And we knew that if we shifted into a higher frequency, these problems and concerns and these fears would actually alter and melt away to a certain extent. And during that procedure, during that session, she actually, we elevated in frequency. She saw a whole shape shifting of me in the room. And then she started laughing, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I get it. We're in a computer program. We are actually in this density, in a program that is not real. We are actually living like we're in a kid's computer game." And she saw the whole thing. She said, "It's so difficult to explain, but I get it now. We are not, of this realm." So quite fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did want to ask you about what kind of people actually come to you. Like, what kind of problems do they come to you with? Is it things like physical ailments, like cancer, or stuff like that, or is it?
Yeah, look, the majority of people that are coming to see me now are people who really feel that they have a mission, that they have work to do. They're starting to wake up. They're understanding this reality. They want more information on what's going on, and they feel like they've been blocked. They feel like they've been awakened to a certain extent, and then something's come in to stop their process. And again, I go back to the technologies that have been applied to people. And so a lot of them are coming forward for that to be released, cleaned and cleared and activated to step into their potential here. And as for people coming forward with diseases, I can't, I'm able to really help people very much with their emotional traumas and their psychological issues. And I can help people with, back pains and issues like that.
Maree, we're just going into a commercial break, so we'll continue the conversation in a few minutes after the break. Yeah, if you just mute your microphone, we'll be back in a few minutes.
Sure.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome back to the Divine Truth on Revolution Radio. Before we continue, I just need to remind you that Revolution Radio is a listener-supported station. We do rely on your donations to keep us on air, so please do go to freedomslips.com and go to the Support Us section, where you can make a one-off donation or you can join our monthly support club where you can make a regular monthly donation starting at only $10, or you can buy one of our seed packs starting at only $60. All of our seeds contain non-GMO, non-hybrid heirloom seeds. Now we'll return to the show. Maree, are you still there?
I'm here.
Sarah's had to drop out. She's not feeling too well. I know she's had a tough week, so she's going to go and get some rest. So she's just had to sign off. So
Okay.
but we'll continue with the show. We were talking just before the break about the kind of people that you help with your multidimensional healing. So I can't remember what you were saying. If you want to continue what you were saying.
Yeah, sure. So I was saying that a lot of the people that are coming forward are people who have had some form of awakening but feel blocked to going further with it. You know, that they feel like that they've known certain things and then they haven't been able to step into more of their truth or align with their mission here. And I find that a lot of these people are actually blocked by the technology that I was referring to previously. And, you know, I work with clearing the programming, the family lineage, the, you know, their own traumas, the traumas from this lifetime or from previous lifetimes. And I work with removing, you know, the technologies, the nanotech, the heavy metals, the genetic manipulation. And these are all done, you know, energetically with the help of multidimensional frequencies that come in and around me. I do have people that sort of, you know, have come to have assistance with healing of physical ailments. What I find is that I really need to work deeply with people and align them with their emotional well-being and align them with their higher truth. And really the process is very similar for them to get them back to being at ease with who they are, as opposed to sort of out of alignment, which creates dis-ease or disease. And, you know, some of the things like people's back pain or, you know, some of their other conditions, their sort of physical ailments do improve, but it's really also dependent on their receptivity. How open are they? How easily can they transition? How easily can they align with who they are? And it does take some self-responsibility and some ongoing work for some of these physical ailments. You know, people you know, need to be working at this themselves as well. What I think that's interesting is that we really do have the technologies to overcome anything. And this is where we need to steer away from the fear, that when we understand that we as multidimensional beings can actually heal and transition through anything that is happening to us. And it is a matter of increasing our frequency for this to happen. But, you know, I certainly don't like to put out the claim, you know, step forward and I'm here to cure your cancer immediately. It doesn't work like that. It's a process. And people also need to be assisting themselves. But I certainly have had people have quite incredible things happen to them, particularly with their psychological issues, their anxieties, their fear-based traumas. I had one child that came to see me who had school anxiety, you know, didn't want to go to school. And everybody had presumed, the psychologist that he had seen had presumed that it was actually separation anxiety from his mother. And he was having this for year after year. He was about 12. And when I did some work on him, we recognized that it was actually due to trauma that had happened to him in a past life in a classroom where the classroom had caught on fire and he and all his classmates had died. And so every time he was going to school, he couldn't understand. He didn't remember that experience, but he just knew it felt bad to be going to school, that something bad was going to happen. Now, that cleared in one session and he never had any more trouble going to school. So those sorts of things are incredible, you know, and life-changing for not only the person but for the whole family. It makes life a lot easier when people aren't running these traumas and anxieties. You know, another person I had came to see me and she wasn't particularly awake and aware. She'd just been guided to come and see me. And she said, it feels like there's something on me making me make decisions that are not for my highest good. And what was interesting is I went, well, I knew that, yes, she did have something. She had an entity that was really puppeteering her and not letting her express her highest truth and step into who she really needed to be. And when we removed this, I mean, it was quite incredible. She actually cracked into a higher level of consciousness and actually started channeling in information. And she took on a different sort of persona and voice and started to say, I'm not from here. I've known this all along. I'm from another planet. I'm here to do some good work. I've always known this. She felt full of love and joy. She was crying and she just couldn't believe what she'd opened up to. After the session, she said, wow, I just feel completely different. I feel like something has been taken off my back and I feel much more free to make decisions that will be, better support me. So really my work is about returning people to their natural state, the natural state being one of peace, love, joy, self-healing, well-being, an excitement about being here, and really being able to become more present in the present moment and able to actually access some of these frequencies for themselves, so they're not taken into the future with anxiety, fear of the future, fear of what's going to happen to me, how am I going to survive. Those anxieties do drop away, and that in itself is so healing, because if we're living in a state of peace and joy, we get healing on all levels.
Yeah. What do you think about this idea? I've read about this, that like everyone has cancer, it's just dormant, and that something triggers it, an event in your life or something happens, and then the cancer becomes, active in your body. And I mean, I've heard you talk about things like the cancer actually activates on a higher level, on a higher realm or dimension, and then it manifests here in 3D as cancer, which is maybe a slightly different way of looking at it. But I've heard the idea that everyone's got cancer, it's just dormant in your body, it just takes something to trigger it. Right. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, right. I don't recall ever saying that about it existing in the multidimensional realm and coming down. I think it's actually more to do with our physical body that undergoes so much trauma and stress here in this reality. And I think that that's what triggers it, that we're out of alignment with this higher truth and these higher frequencies and a sense of well-being and good health. And I think it just, I think disease comes about after being sort of emotionally out of alignment for over months to years. I think that we do have cells that are constantly, mutating, but when we're not so stressed or traumatized, our natural immune system actually functions very well to ensure that these cells don't become rampant and produce, cancers. And so I think that we when we're in good health, well-being, we actually are capable of, overcoming any of these mutating cells. But I think where it gets out of hand is when we're, out of alignment. And also I think that when we're eating genetically modified foods and we're, being subjected to, electromagnetic frequencies and chemtrails and all of that, it really is setting us up to be physically unwell. And but again, I go back to the fact that we don't have to live in fear, because when we embody higher frequencies, align with our truth, we actually can overcome anything that's being done to us. And the whole reason to be here in physical form is to connect with these frequencies and become a conduit of these higher frequencies, not only for our own well-being, but to emanate this out into the collective to change things dramatically in the mass consciousness. Yeah.
Do you think it's also linked to like things like DNA? Because you see sometimes people, they smoke their entire lives, they don't eat particularly well, but they live to like 80, 90 years old, and there's other people who are super fit, super healthy, and then they get cancer or they get a heart attack and die. And it doesn't seem like, I don't know how to put it, it doesn't seem fair in a way, that some people can like smoke their entire lives and they're perfectly fine, and other people, they could be jogging out one day and then just drop dead. I mean,
oh look, absolutely. I think it is definitely related to our genetics, and again to our state of well-being and our emotional health as well. But so there's one thing to inherit a gene that may cause cancer, but if that gene is not swimming in a soup of emotion and imbalance, it may never get switched on. So that, again, it goes back to a state of being, emotional state, mental state. Are we living from peace and joy and love? And therefore, these things don't get activated. But not only are we inheriting a gene, we're also inheriting a response to life, because that gets programmed into us in our family units. So, there's been studies done where you've had twins that have been separated, both carrying similar genes. One's in one sort of family unit and growing up, and one's in another, and one does switch on that gene for cancer and another person doesn't. Well, it's to do with the environment as well. And I think that we can get so far as to actually even alter the presence of that gene and actually have our own genetic upgrades, again, with these frequencies, to switch the genes off and actually, remove them. And I know that some of the work that I do is about, releasing some of the manipulated fragments of DNA and actually upgrading and activating what science has called junk DNA, which is obviously not junk. We haven't been made with junk. It's dormant. It's ready to be activated, to bring in skills and abilities and a connectedness beyond this dimension, to actually give us access out of this construct, this matrix, this computer program. And it's a loop. We start feeding back when we're filled with these frequencies and with this access to the higher dimensional realm. Our fears do melt away. And when you're not in fear, you're not feeding the chaos or the drama, you're clearing off your own programming, your triggers. It's a feedback loop. The more you do, the more you can access, the more you gain. And so, it's constantly reminding yourself of who you are and who you are at your essence, as opposed to what this lower dimension has told you that you are, given you limitations and a feeling of, unworthiness and not quite getting there. Right.
So is DNA multidimensional as well? I mean, I know we've got like two strand DNA, but people say we're supposed to have a lot more. And I don't know why. Why? I guess that's part of the programming.
I think our DNA is our access to our multidimensional realms, and I think that that's why it does get so manipulated and so shut down, and where there's been genetic insertions and manipulation. Because I think when it's in its fully activated form, it is our access to the multidimensional realms. So if you want to suppress and control the population and trap them and enslave them, then you actually switch off their ability to connect to their truth. And I think that that's what's been done to us to a certain extent. And when we remember who we are, embodying more of this truth, we activate more of that DNA.
So when you say activate DNA, does that mean you activate more strands of DNA, or do you just activate the DNA that you're already carrying around with you?
I think you activate the DNA that you're carrying around with you. I think you actually alter that. And you also activate other strands that are multidimensional. And I think this is where science at the moment is struggling, because we obviously can't look at, multidimensional DNA when it doesn't actually show up in a 3D reality. But I feel like that is what's happening. But I think that the actual genetic material of the DNA is certainly changing. And I think there's been some studies done on some of these children that have come in with more skills and abilities. They're more awake, and I think their genetic structure is different. But look, I must say, I haven't done a lot of research or study in that area. I'm just working on what my own knowings and my own understandings from what, the work I've been doing.
From your understanding of like the multidimensional aspects of healing, what is your perception now of conventional medicine? I mean, how far behind are they in looking into the kind of concepts that you actually work with every day, is there any type of medicine where they actually deal with the same type of thing that you're actually working with, or are they so far behind that they can't really understand these kind of concepts?
Oh, look, I think they're so far behind. I mean, my the medical world that I've come from, think that I'm crazy. They think that this is all just, hocus pocus, and cannot understand it at all. But we've got to understand that the medical training is a conditioning to actually look at disease process in a certain limited way, and they don't actually understand the effects of the emotional state on the genetics. And if you look at the studies of Bruce Lipton, and the work that he has done, and how out of mainstream he became, the more he understood what was going on. And I think when we recognize that the mainstream medicine, is really a conditioning and an understanding of a disease process from a limited point of view, and that's been done, in my opinion, purposefully. Now, I'm not saying that all mainstream medicine is bad, and by no means am I saying that. And I certainly believe that there are many doctors that are doing the job from a place of wanting to serve others, but it's just because of the limited access to information. And if we understand that the role of pharmaceutical companies and how significant their role is in training and guiding doctors to make the choices for their patients, we start to question, wow, what's really going on here? And, wouldn't it be nice to see mainstream medicine open up to some of these alternative understandings, and the concept of energy medicine, and the understandings that have been available to the Indigenous populations that really understand medicine from, plant-based nature. And, obviously there are many different ways and modalities of healing that mainstream medicine doesn't access at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff has been forgotten, really. Like you were saying, like a lot of medicine from like Indigenous populations, they still use natural, herbal remedies for all kinds of things, but conventional medicine seems to ignore all that, really, and they tend to go towards using, big pharma, as a way of curing people, which is
absolutely.
And
one of the things, sorry, Tosh, one of the things that I woke up to was the fact that, here we are in the modern age with all this technology and so-called advances in medicine, but we have more diabetes, more obesity, more youth suicide, more depression, more cancer than we've ever had before. We're not actually solving the problems here. We're not really combating illness. We're putting Band-Aids on, but really the illnesses are continuing. And, people are rarely cured of their chronic illnesses. They're usually medicated so that they can actually live with them. And, I see an alternative path to this, definitely. I think a
lot of it is curing the symptoms rather than dealing with the root cause of a disease.
Absolutely. And then we end up with side effects from medications. And I think sometimes too that the medications come out with these ideas of, oh, this is going to be a miracle. And a few years later, there's an understanding of, oh, whoopsie, we didn't realize that this would have these side effects. And in fact, it's actually caused, some other ailment or some other, life-threatening illness in some circumstances, so that we know that, disease and illness can actually be caused by some of the treatments that mainstream medicine is using. And
I mean, I've seen like people who take medication and then they have side effects, and they take medication for the side effects. So they're taking like dozens and dozens of pills to like.
Totally.
Well,
it becomes
ridiculous.
a self-fulfilling industry, doesn't it? Illness is really an industry. I mean, the sicker the population, the more money that goes into big pharma. And, it really is, it's an industry. Illness
the idea is to keep you perpetually ill so they can make money, off the medication that you need to take, basically.
Totally.
That's the way I see it.
It's interesting because when I do the work on people, and I do some people on a regular basis, they might have what I call a sort of spiritual spiritual hygiene, I call it, where, they might come and see me or give me a call on Skype, once a month or once every few months, to just sort of, to remind them of who they are and clean off anything that they may have come into contact with, or, clear off other deeper programs. And these people say that people around them are reporting, you look younger. They've lost weight without trying. Their physicality has actually changed. They feel brighter. They're being told that their mood and their attitude towards life, that other people are actually noticing what an improvement there's been. And so this is just, they glow. It's like, they start to shine. I have people that say, it's like you've pulled back the veil and switched the lights on. I feel like there's more light. And they actually embody that, and you can actually see the light coming through them. They actually look awake, as opposed to what I see often walking around the streets, particularly in big shopping centres that I definitely try and avoid for many reasons. But, people are looking, dead, overweight. Their skin is sort of grey. They don't seem to have any, light or animation. And I really, I don't like the direction that humanity is going in great masses.
Yeah, I think the environment that we're living in now has a lot to do with it. Not just, the chemtrails and the pollution and everything, and even the food. I read an article the other day that 80% of the food on our supermarket shelves didn't even exist 100 years ago. So it gives you an idea of how much processed and crap there is on our shelves, which, we don't really need,
Well, you have to sort of question, why are we genetically modifying food? Why are we using so many, non-natural preservatives and additives? It doesn't seem to be improving our well-being. And, it's not right. And so many things that are going on the planet aren't actually for our highest good. And I think we wake up and realize, we're waking up and realizing that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is to do with, corporations and business want to make as much money as they can, really. And whatever's the cheapest method of producing food is the way that, it doesn't necessarily mean the food is healthy or good for us, but it's cheap, and a lot of like junk food and even things like, fast food and stuff like that is not good for you, but people find it convenient. With people's lifestyles these days, they want convenience more than, health, I guess, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it sets up a bit of a loop. You eat that food, you feel more sluggish, you feel unmotivated, you then sort of can't be bothered, you then, continue to live that lifestyle, and it's sort of, it is a loop that people get set up. It's the 9 to 5 work lifestyle, grab some junk food, sit in front of the television, get some electromagnetic frequencies and some mind manipulation through whatever you're watching while you're hoeing down your fast food garbage.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really sort of help people wake up.
I wanted to get into like another aspect is, this is a question I sort of ask myself sometimes, is what is it to be a human being? And I think the whole definition of a human being is a bit, I don't know, misinterpreted in a lot of ways. But, I know some people say that they don't feel like a human being. They feel either alien or hybrid, or they feel like they don't belong here. And have you come across a lot of those type of people in your work?
Oh, look, so many people I work with, they just say, I don't feel like I belong here. I don't feel like I'm from here. And I think that we aren't actually from here. I think we do come in from other dimensions and other planets. I think we do get trapped here, as we've discussed before, but I don't think we're originally from here. And many, many people have expressed that to me. And I think that there's also an underlying feeling in people, even those that aren't awake, that it doesn't feel quite right here, and they don't feel in some ways that they belong. And that brings in that sense of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not quite right, I'm not, but they can't access what it is. But when we're awake and we go, oh, that actually makes sense that I don't feel like I fit in or belong here, because I'm actually not from here. But when we switch on those lights, what happens is that those frequencies start attracting other people that are holding that frequency, and you start to come into contact with people for the new awakened you that reflects back who you are, and your frequency actually recognizes somebody else who's got that frequency switched on. And then you start realizing, oh, we actually are here from other planets, but we are meant to be here in this physical, mind body suit that we've put on for this lifetime. And then it becomes being in the world, animating this mind body costume without the triggering and without the control. So we're in the world and we're not actually of it. We're actually, able to dance with what presents without being triggered, reactive. And life becomes a lot sort of simpler and easier for people.
Yeah, I think the whole concept of like a human soul is a bit alien, because I don't think there is such a thing as a human soul. I think we all come from different places. We all have different souls. And like you said, like, when you go into things like activating yourself, you attract the people, I guess you could call it like your soul family or whatever you want to call it. People
Absolutely.
who are similar to yourself. You get those people attracted into your life. And I've sort of found that, you meet someone and it's almost like you already know them, but you can't explain how.
Absolutely.
Can't explain how that can be. You almost have an understanding that I know you already, from other lifetimes or other, places, from previous lives, etc.
Totally. Constant a recognition that goes beyond our normal human understanding. Absolutely.
Yeah, but these are the kind of things you can't explain on a scientific level. Everything has to be, when you go into science and stuff, they have to like prove, reincarnation. They have to prove all these things. And there's no scientific way. I mean, I went to a talk recently with skeptics, the whole room of skeptics. And they were basically, their job was to disprove like mediums and psychics and all this paranormal phenomenon. And when you're trying to talk to a skeptic about these ideas, they're so close-minded. They already have a belief system that none of it's real. It's all trickery and hocus pocus and, this type of thing. Their mind can't even, get around the fact that maybe some of these things are real. Just because you can't prove it on a scientific level, it doesn't mean it's not real. There are so many things we don't understand about the world that we can't measure on a scale, a scientific scale, or measure it in a lab. How do you measure these things and prove them in a lab? You just can't do that, can you?
No, absolutely. And I think that that's the trick of this reality, is the fact that it's a knowing, and it's an experience, and we all have to individually come to those conclusions. And actually, we're not relying on the structure itself or the scientific proof, because we can't get the evidence that way. And this is why it does become so controversial. But I think also we have to understand that they're using language to try and actually prevent us from understanding this, where, we're told, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, or that's, so these are derogatory terms used when people start to wake up to the reality, to actually judge and condition one another, to actually say, come on, step back in line. This is ridiculous. You sound mad. So, we're not encouraged, are we, to open up to these understandings. So, and that is changing, and that is why, we've got shows like this. And I think that that's what's so exciting about these times on the planet, is that we are waking up, and then more and more people are stepping forward and actually bringing out this information and saying, well, look, this is what I see, this is what I know, this is what's happening to me. And when we do that, other people are getting encouraged to step up and do the same. So, that's where the transition is happening, that we're actually turning away from so-called authority and saying, well, actually, I'm not so sure about these authorities. I'm relying more on my own inner knowing and the collective and the other people that I've met and now working with, that have an understanding of this. And this has to be real. Lights are going on the other side of the world with people that know the information I know. So, and I haven't been in contact with them. So clearly there is a reality that is beyond normal human understanding, and certainly beyond the authorities that we've all been turning to.
Yeah, I agree. Have you come across things like, I guess you call spirit guides in your work, people who feel like a presence that's around them all the time, guiding them throughout their life. And what do you think these spirit guides are? Are they, like we were talking before, like soul family, or are they some other type of energy?
I think that these are galactic soul family beings that are guiding us, and I know that I have often a presence of beings with me. And certainly when I'm working with people, they'll report, oh, wow, you have a big being, big blue being standing behind you, and a couple have come in beside you. And I can feel their presence, and I know that they're there. And I think that these are, multidimensional galactic beings. And I think what we need to be careful with, though, is a discernment, a level of discernment. There is trickery going on, and I think it's not only going on, just in the physical. It's going on in realms that we can't, access with our normal senses. And some people are believing that they've got certain guides and certain that may not be in their highest interest. And I think this is where we get a level of discernment and feel the energies and go into how do these presences feel to them, and if they're uplifting, if it's joy-filled, if it's loving, if it's guiding in a direction that's opening you up to more, then that's brilliant, beautiful. And I think we all do have access to that. I think it's, when we're not alone, we have galactic families guiding us.
Yeah, I think there is a matter of discernment in that there are entities out there who don't have our best interests at heart. I mean, I don't like labeling things, but they've been called things like archons and stuff like this, which are negative entities that in some way they attach themselves to us and almost like feed off of us in a way. Like you were saying before, they feed off of our fear. The more fear you have, the more the more fear they generate. It's almost like an endless cycle kind of thing. They
Well,
attach
I've had some amazing experiences with people, and again, my work is often a knowing that comes to me. And I started saying to people, oh, I'm removing archonic plasma technologies that have integrated with your very essence. And I sort of go, wow, where are these lines coming from? This is during the process with the person. And while I'm saying that, the person will say to me, oh, I think we better finish the session. I feel really uncomfortable. And I'll say, no, I think we're hitting something that's making you, that wants you to feel uncomfortable. It doesn't want to be extracted. And when I continued with this work, on a number of occasions, people have had quite profound experiences. I mean, people have even vomited when I've been saying that, and then said, wow, I feel completely relieved, something has left. I've had people who have said a device has come out of them, stood beside them, veiled as them, and said, you won't get rid of me. And then I've said, well, we will, and we continue putting light in and actually sort of shatter it really. And it resolves, dissolves, and transforms. And the person says, I have never felt so light. I feel completely different. So there is a presence of this technology that's actually, using our energy source, because I don't believe that they're organic themselves, that they're coming in using our energy source and feeding off the fear and actually, veiling and puppeteering us and actually getting in on our deepest fears and triggers and not in our highest good by any means.
Mm. Where do you think these things come from? These archons, these entities. I mean, why would they want to come here and feed off of us? Why create that fear? And is that the only way they can survive? I mean, what are these light things? What are they?
Yeah, I think this is the only way they can survive. I think they need us as hosts, and I think that they've come into this realm. Look, it's sort of beyond my full understanding at the present moment, but where exactly they come from. I think some of these have been introduced by non-benevolent beings. I think that these are it's technology that's been brought here to feed off us, suppress us, manipulate us, and that helps with negative agendas for this planet, which serves the non-benevolent beings. I think it's interesting. I think some of the things like black goo, I think, have come in with has been brought here from other systems, other dimensions, and has come here onto the planet to create some havoc. I'm not exactly sure. This is just my sort of feeling and my knowing. I mean, it's interesting, Taj. The other day I was listening to a very awake scientist, a German gentleman who was talking a lot about the technologies and things that have been introduced here, and he was talking about the black goo. And it was fascinating because it had been the understandings that I had been sort of downloaded and even more information. And I thought, wow, this correlates with exactly what I had understood. And then what was interesting is I did a reader with my 7-year-old child that evening. And I kid you not, her reader was about an alien coming to the planet, chatting to a boy and apologizing for the black goo that that this alien had introduced to the planet. And he took the child in this storybook, took the child back to his planet to show that his planet had been destroyed by this black goo, and he'd actually somehow brought it down to our planet, and it was actually infecting everything. I kid you not, this was my 7-year-old's evening reader book, was all about aliens coming with black goo.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole show on black goo, but I know a little bit about the black goo, and
but I just think
it's an interesting topic.
But I'm just thinking, what's it doing in a child's reader?
Yeah.
How incredible was that? And the timing of that I had just been listening to this scientist discussing all of that, and I'm just thinking it's in the child's reader, 7-year-old's reader. So there's truth here coming through in different ways. And of course, nobody else would pay any attention to it. They'd just think, oh, this is a lovely fantasy story. And there it was in her reader. I was gobsmacked.
Yeah, there is this concept about the black goo. It's appearing in a lot of movies and like TV series. You see the black goo, and it's all linked to like aliens, and that type of thing. It's some kind of alien entity.
Technology.
Yeah. It's also linked to things like the AI. That it's some kind of artificially created intelligence that's been sent here. For what purpose, I don't know. Whether it's a good purpose or a bad purpose. In the movies, it's portrayed as very bad. That it's here to almost take over the human race in a way.
Yeah, well, I'm not detecting that it's got a great agenda. However, I go back to the fact that we don't live in fear, that we, as embodied multidimensional beings with high frequencies, will overcome anything. And this is the advantage we have. We have the access to the multidimensional frequencies, and we are here in physical, and that gives us the greatest power of anything on this planet to overcome anything. So it's just more knowledge. It's becoming aware. And I say to people, sometimes people say, oh, I don't like having any information about this negative stuff. Oh, that's just, fueling it and keeping it alive. Well, I don't believe that I am. I think I'm becoming aware of it to overcome it. And I certainly don't stop at the level of awareness and sit in fear and intrepidation about what's going to happen to us. I go, wow, this has been happening on the planet for a long time. And guess what? We're waking up to it so we can overcome it. And I think that's that's why it's okay to become aware so that we can rise above it all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you talked about I think many people have said we've been here before, we've been through this process before. You could talk about Egypt and Atlantis and even before that, and those civilizations were destroyed for whatever reason. But a lot of people think that we're here now and that we're more likely to succeed, and that whatever happens now, we're probably living at the best time in history to be alive now, to see this process happen. I don't know what your vision is of what will happen to mankind in the coming years, decades, and so forth.
Yeah, well, look, I've always thought that we would, we're going to be waking up more and more, and that we're going to actually have a tipping point. And I wonder, are we actually reaching that now, where we've got more people holding frequencies, awakening, and actually getting out of the fear and the chaos, and actually saying, no, we don't consent to this level of control and manipulation. And that is going to change this reality significantly. I like to think that it's going to be a nice, fairly reasonable transition, although I think it is going to be, there is going to be a lot of chaos, and fear is going to be created. I've tried not to sort of feed into when, to exact dates of when things are going to really, because I think it is a gradual process, and we're already in that process of bringing forward, people say, well, when do you think disclosure is going to happen? Well, I think we're having a form of disclosure. It's coming from the ground up through us getting more and more activated and aware. But what was interesting, I had a patient came to see me again who was not particularly awake and aware. It's the woman I was describing who said that she felt there was something on her making her make decisions that were not in her highest good. And when I removed that, she channeled in that information about where she'd been, and she knew that she's not from here. She actually then went on during that session to say, oh my, something horrific is going to be happening on the planet. We are going to have disasters everywhere. There's going to be chaos. We're going to have a lot of destruction. And she started crying. And I said to her, oh, look, maybe you're tapping into an old timeline. Maybe this isn't about now. And she said, no, it's coming, and it's coming soon. We're going to see a lot of devastation and destruction. Then she lightened up and she said, it's okay. It's a cleansing. It's what the planet needs. We need to go through some dark to really awaken people, to shift consciousness. So, I was quite shocked by that. Again, she's not somebody who's coming that was very awake and aware or had researched any of these topics, and it certainly wasn't something that I wanted to delve into. But that was the information she was coming forward, that things were going to ramp up in terms of, chaos and destruction, but it was part of the transition. And I think those of us that are awake and aware are at the leading edge of this, of understanding, and are going to help other people transition through their own through the chaos and through some of the destruction. And I think that this is why I've had the experiences that I've had. I awoke through deep grief. I awoke through tragedy. And then I transitioned and transformed in such a significant way. And I think that that's where my skills will actually help people the more that this ramps up, because it hasn't been an easy ride. I've come from, tragedy to open up to something that is very positive. And that's what we need to be guiding people through at this time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to get into things like dates and predictions and things like that. I mean, everyone talked about 2012, and everyone was talking about there was going to be like some ending and all this kind of thing. But personally, I think 2012 was a beginning, not an ending.
Totally.
I don't think it was. They all talked about the Mayan calendar, and it was going to be the end of the world. I think most people missed the whole point of what actually happened in 2012, and that it was actually a shift happened, and it was the start of a beginning. That's what I think. Anyway,
well, I think that we've got limited interpretation, haven't we? Again, we're coming, we're sort of blindfolded in, we can't understand it when we don't have access to all the information. And I think this is what's beautiful about humanity, bringing in different pieces of the puzzle. And I think we're all stepping forward with information and understandings, and that when we work together, we start to get a bigger picture of how things are actually transitioning and changing. And I agree with you. Don't like to pin dates. Don't like to sort of say exactly how, to really put any great emphasis or understanding on what's going to happen. I just thought it was interesting that this woman had actually come forward with that when I had heard other people speaking about that. But it was interesting to have a woman who wasn't particularly awake sort of channeling that information through. But, it's a matter of wait and see, and we just take self-responsibility for who we are, continuing to upgrade ourselves and release ourselves from that doesn't serve. And this is such an important thing. It's taking the self-responsibility. and actually just moving forward into the truth of who we are.
Yeah. I mean, the whole date thing is I don't really pay much attention to. Every year you get, people predicting events that are going to happen on certain dates. I think the big one this year is the lunar, the solar eclipse that's going to happen in America next month. I think it is on August 21st. And I've heard people messaging me some big events going to happen during this solar eclipse. And I've heard other things about September 23rd. There's going to be some planetary alignment that hasn't happened since the time of Christ, and all kinds of things are going to happen. And yeah, I mean, these days always like come and go every year, and nothing really happens. So I sort of like given up on following these predictions anymore, to be honest.
I think well, it's certainly, there's certainly lots of things that have been put out there that you've gone, oh well, really, that was all a bit of a fizz. But I think that we are transitioning, and it is getting more evident to me, more people stepping forward. Things are, there is more chaos in the world. We are seeing that, and I think but we are also getting activated for more. And I think we need to understand that, we are being assisted. We're being assisted by benevolent off-world beings. We're being assisted by photonic light packages coming in and actually naturally activating our dormant DNA. And we've also got frequency changes going on the planet. The Schumann's resonance is going up, and that is also activating our DNA, so we can embody more light and get a greater perspective of who we are. So we are being assisted. So I think, again, no matter what's happening, we keep understanding that we are in a transition, and we are actually evolving into higher frequency beings that will live in more peace, love and joy. And that's the ultimate aim.
Okay. We're going to finish in about 5 minutes, I think. And the last thing I wanted to cover is this whole idea of the ascension. And everyone seems to have a different idea of what the ascension is and what's going to happen. And I know you talked a little bit with Maree Rodwell on that show this week about the new Earth, and the frequency that when you raise your frequency, you will have access to this new Earth. And can you talk a little bit about that, how that works, and how that links into? I mean, what exactly is ascension to you? What is ascension to you?
Ascension to me is just embodying more and more of the truth of who you are as a multidimensional being. And it's changing your perspective from this human-only perspective to a much greater perspective of who we really are, which is enormous. We are multidimensional, infinite light beings connected to source energy. And when we come from that perspective and actually embody that, we actually take ourselves out of this dense reality, and we're here on the planet, but not of the density. We're not triggered we're not triggered, and we're not reactive. We're not falling into depression and fear. We're living in that background state of peace, love and joy. It doesn't mean that there won't be some difficult things come your way, but you'll transition through them more simply, and there will be more more harmony as you're doing so. And how I see it is that we're actually going to be this new Earth is actually, to me, it's here. It's actually to do with a frequency. It's to do with accessing the higher frequency of the dimension. And so that we're here, but living in a higher frequency realm. Now, some people may not have access to that, so they'll almost carry on as if not much has changed. They'll just see the world as it has always been. And then there'll be a number of us that are saying, wow, this is incredible. And this is, we're sort of living in density reality, in a frequency reality overlaying. And we will not, we will be living in that, and they'll be living in a denser one. And it's almost like we won't have that much to do with them. In the same way, Taj, that we were saying, as we activate our frequencies, we're attracting other people that have this activation and this knowing and that are awake. And you start to transition your life into being with people that have these understandings, that are awake, that are aware. And that I see is the new Earth. That your life changes. You're not dealing with people who are negative, in fear, reactive, triggering, coming from dense ego programming. You're starting to deal with people that actually are about service to others. and you start creating communities of those sorts of people. And to me, that's ascension.
Right. So in a way, there'll be almost like a divide in society. There'll be the people who will go through the ascension and will almost separate themselves from the rest of society in a way.
Yeah, and I think it's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, you are attracted to the people who are the same frequency of you, and as you go through, like, I mean, from my own experience, a lot of people have, I've lost a lot of friends and things who maybe they weren't supposed to be in my life or whatever, and I've gained new friends, who are maybe more in tune to who I am, and like you're saying, in my frequency. And that will happen to a lot of people who are going through this process, but then other people will never actually even experience this process because they don't have access to that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I really, believe and understand that. And I think that that's also where people need to realize when they are letting go of friends and circumstances and maybe jobs, that it's actually about opening up space for something higher and better to come forward. But it's fear, it generates some fear in people, and this is where we need to learn to detach and have some trust in who we really are and who we're becoming.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult process for most people, because obviously they've spent their entire lives living in this 3D reality, and in a way they have to let it go. They have to let it go and move on. That's a very big step for most people to take.
Absolutely. Very important move, though. Very important. Letting go, being guided, and moving forward to who you're supposed to be. Definitely. Not easy, but that's what's required. And I guess, again, that's where my work assists, because I've done a lot of that work for myself, and so have many others. And that's why these shows and other people that are awake and aware are here to assist people transition through this.
Mm-hmm. Where can people get a hold of you? How do they contact you if they want to book a session or find out more about you?
People could look me up on my website, which is just simply mareebatchelor.com. And my email address is bachelormaree@gmail.com. And I'll just spell that out. It's actually BATCHELOREE@gmail.com.
Okay, I'll post all your contact information in the YouTube video when it goes up. That's the end of the show, and thank you for coming on, Dr. Maree Batchelor.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great to have this conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.